When that appeal was being heard and I got that phone call, I felt God touch me and tell me, you're getting out. I don't know how, because the cards were stacked against me. Everything was wrong. And, it's all these charges. And I'm sitting in a cell because before that, I had gone out to lunch with my dad and everyone at the courthouse. And I didn't think, okay, this is over. I'm not guilty. Next thing you know, the jury's in and I got all these marshals standing around me. And I'm like, okay, this isn't good. And then he wouldn't let me out on bail pending appeal and handcuffed me. And, I had lost my way. I was just like, but slowly I got it back. But that changed me.
Fire and water meet, going down deep. Sing, oh, bury me, carry me, oh, far beneath. Oh, fire and water meet, watching me think everything free. Yeah. Oh, everything free. Down to the river. Down to the river.
When we moved the show out here to the beautiful state of Florida, and I said to my boy Vinnie, hey, instead of this time coming up to freezing cold Connecticut to film, why don't you come out here to Florida? I wasn't expecting 50-mile-an-hour wind gusts and not being able to feel my fingers. And yet here we are for another episode of Sheepdog and Shepherd. I'm Kyle, one of your hosts.
And I'm Greg, your other host.
Greg, why don't you tell them all what you do for a living?
I pastor the prison campuses and first responder ministry for the Church of 1122.
So, guys, listen. The wind, it is what it is. Don't take it up with us if we have audio issues. Talk to God. We've got connections through pray.com, but I don't know what's going on. We have no control over this. So, with that being said, I want to introduce you all to a good friend of mine. Tell them all who you are, man.
I'm Vinnie Davis.
So, Vinnie, we're gonna drill into your backstory in a little bit here, but I noticed you're wearing a crucifix. Why don't we start off, man, by talking a little bit about your faith?
I'm a devout Catholic. Been for many, many years. I had lost my faith in July 6, 1972. 10 years old, I was having a race with my mother and she fell on the ground, hit her head and died in my arms. So that kind of twisted me from being the altar boy that I was. And I stayed kind of practicing, but I know that God kept his eye out on me, even though I wasn't keeping up with the religion as I should have been while I was a police officer. Being in 3 shootouts, getting stabbed, thrown out a 3-story window. The big guy was looking over. He was taking care of me. But then, after I wound up going to federal prison, and that's a long story. What happened was, my lawyers had informed me that the Third Circuit Court of Appeals heard my appeal. And they were going to be making a decision. And I went back to my cell and I got on my knees, and it's the first time I prayed. And I asked God, I said, you get me out of this, or help these judges see the light that I was framed. I will be the best Christian that there is. And lo and behold, it's like he heard me. The strangest thing, because I felt it. And the very next day, it was the quickest decision on an appeal ever. They released me and didn't even have an opinion written. I know this because the federal judge that made me show up in his courtroom the next day was screaming at the top of his lungs, what is he doing out of prison? Why is he in front of me yelling and screaming? And the AUSA said, Third Circuit Court of Appeals, the Chief Justice has not put down a decision. He said that Davis is to be released immediately and the decision will come back within 30 days. So, whole new aspect on life after that.
Now, I think God's got a good sense of humor. And there was a story that you shared with me when we were filming back in Connecticut, I don't know, a year or so ago. Did I understand right that you were kind of dressed like a nun or something at one point?
Yeah, you understood right. I was an undercover cop in New York City in the transit, and what happened was, our captains would always say to me, "You come up with a new and ingenious idea to catch these criminals," because I was pretty good at it. I'm a white guy working in the South Bronx, so there wasn't a lot of options. Telephone man, con ed man, doctor, dressed up as like a doctor. But on this particular one, at 149 in the Grand Concourse, we had guys that were doing the robberies and nobody could catch them. So I said to my captain, I said, "Listen," I said, "why don't I dress up like a nun and I'll put one of those chocolate bar stands out in front of the booth and I'll sell chocolate." Wasn't there 20 minutes. And the robbery, guy with a gun, robbery went down. So now I'm chasing him. I grab my gun off my ankle. And here I am with the habit and the cross and everything. I'm running down the Grand Concourse. And the guy's shooting at me and shooting back. And then finally we capture him. But the funniest was listening to the 9/11 tapes of the people that were calling in who witnessed this. And it went something like this: 911, where's your emergency? Yo, you're not going to believe this. There's a nun with a gun running down 149th Street shooting at people. Next, 911, where's your emergency? Yo, you better send an ambulance. 149th Street over here by the hospital. This nun just shot this guy. And I'm just like, well, there you go. Hysterical. But when the guy decided to go to trial with that, that's why we got to hear all the tapes in court and everything else. But if you think it's funny hearing me, you should have heard the jury listening to this. It was just hysterical.
That's awesome.
So I figured you two would probably get along well because you've been to prison and he's spent a lot of time in prison too, probably just for two totally different reasons. Real quick context for everybody who is just tuning into the show for the first time. Why don't you give a little bit about your background?
Sure. So about 2 years ago, I took over our prison ministry at the Church of 1122. Every Monday, I'm in 2 state prisons ministering to the inmates there. I also lead our first responder ministry at the church, so I get to serve all of our first responder agencies in Northeast Florida, Southeast Georgia. So I have a pretty interesting dichotomy that I live in, ministering to inmates on Mondays, and then the rest of my week I get to minister to the men and women who put them into prison.
Now, for everyone who's watching this show, perhaps for the first time, the name of the show is Sheepdog and Shepherd because we talk about the impact that God has had on the law enforcement community and on law and order, because law and order is at its very foundation, at its very core, it is biblical, right? And so we bring in all sorts of different people onto the show from all over the country. They talk a little bit about the role that faith has had on their career, and then they share all sorts of stories about their own experiences on the job, off the job, what have you. And Vinnie's story is really interesting to me because it's a story about justice. Ultimately, it's a story about justice, but that's not the story that it was in the beginning. And so Greg, as you heard, Greg is a pastor. He's also a police chaplain with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office. I am not a priest, a pastor, a minister, a deacon, clergy, anything like that. I'm a Christian. I'm a dad of 4 little girls. I'm a husband. And all of our companies seek to serve and glorify God in everything that we do. So you're not going to get any good, solid biblical teachings or advice from me. That's what I have Greg here for. But I hope that the stories that you hear on the show, when you can hear them and they're not being blown away by wind gusts of 50 miles an hour, wake you up to the fact that regardless of where you are in your journey of faith, God is there. And you may in this very moment be feeling closer to God than you've ever felt in your life or further from God than you've ever felt in your life. But that's because you've made a move, not because He has. And we're told to draw nearer to Him and He will draw nearer to us. And that's really at the foundation of the show. So Vinnie, let's dive in, man. Let's hear about your backstory and what led to the book. And what's the name of the book, by the way?
The name of the book is The Cop and the Stalker. It's my true life story about craziness that happened to me that you're going to read it 576 pages and you're not going to believe it when it's over. You're going to be like, okay, where's the second book? That's coming much later. What happened was I fell in love with a young girl, 18 years old. I was 18. And we decided to get married at 21 years old. And I was on a list to become a police officer in New York. But turns out that she had a past with a criminal by the name of Richie Sable. He was doing 7 years for armed robbery when she met me. And he didn't want to take no for an answer. He started calling her up, making threats. I'll throw acid on your face to make you so ugly nobody will want you. I'll cut off your fingers and mail them home to your mother. But for the most part, it was all empty promises because he never got that close in the beginning. And we went on to get married, and I became a New York City cop and proceeded a career and enjoyed being a cop. It was my entire life. And as years went by, I heard stories about Richie Sable, what he was doing, what he was up to. A couple of years later, he got convicted for credit card fraud. He was beating people up. He was an all-around terrible guy. The feds got him. They put him away for 12 years, of which he did 6 years. Then he was back out on the street. And the next thing I heard was he was selling kilos of coke. He was moving it from Florida up into Georgia and then into New York. A year later, someone got wind to the DEA of what he was doing, and he was arrested selling 2 kilos to an undercover DEA agent. And the NYPD was notified that he was going to be doing 20 years, and your officer didn't have to worry about any threats to him or his wife anymore. And we were ecstatic. 2 years later, I'm driving on Central Avenue in Yonkers by my house. I'm stopped at a traffic light. I look out to my left, and there he is in a BMW with another guy. He does this and takes off. I chase him. I'm in a Chevy Nova, no BMW, so I couldn't catch him. The NYPD put protection on me. Yonkers police also protection on me while they were investigating what was going on, because as far as we knew, we were supposed to be notified if Sable got out of prison. So a week goes by, constant protection on my house and on my wife. I come into the captain's office, and he says to me, "I need your gun and shield." And I'm like, "Why?" These 2 FBI agents say that Richie Sable is in Georgia in federal prison and that you've lost your mind and you're taking this way too serious. And I'm like, "Captain, he's out, they're lying," and thus the story begins. Because what happened was they lied to the NYPD, they lied to everyone involved. He really was out, he was working as an informant. And at Christmas time, my brother-in-law is sitting at the table and he says, I thought Sable was in prison for 20 years to life. I said, "Well, he's supposed to be." And he said, "Well, my buddy is hanging out with him and doing all sorts of illicit stuff." So I says, "All right." I said, "Well, you better tell your friend he's being set up because they're telling me he's in prison. If he's out on the streets, he's either a rat or he's working for somebody or he won an appeal, but stay away from him." That was my downfall, because after that, I became the subject of their investigation. Even though they lied to me and lied to my captain and lied to the whole job saying that Sable was in prison, he wasn't. He was out, he was working as an informant, and then they came after me for obstruction of justice.
Insane. Absolutely. All right, so play this out.
So, went on trial, thought it would be in New York because everything happened in New York, but the Fed said, "No, we're going to send him out to Newark, New Jersey, where they would get a favorable jury out there. Instead of having a New York City police officer with 37 commendations for bravery sitting there in the box, they would send me out to Newark." And I thought everything was going to be fair, and it wasn't. They lied. First, to get me fired from the police department, they sent an FBI agent in to say that I gave my gun to a known gangster and let it shoot it out the window of my car 6 or 8 times. Never happened. But when the FBI agent testified to that at my department trial, I was fired. So now I had no PBA, I had no lawyers, I had no nothing. I had to fight this all on my own, and it was going to get costly. So Tommy Cassione, my best friend, who was my lawyer, we thought we had a beat, and 11 charges, interstate use of a telephone to aid racketeering. It's never on a phone. But every time someone mentioned my name on the phone, that was another charge against me. Conspiracy to obstruct justice, witness tampering of a witness I never tampered with. So make a long story short, they got their conviction, and they got me sentenced to 4 years. And I filed an immediate appeal with my attorneys, and it took 16 months, 5.5 months in a box in solitary confinement, and then into the federal prison system. It took 16 months before they heard my appeal and overturned the entire thing. And they basically warned the judge, who was crooked, don't try this again. But he was TO'd, and he threatened me and says, you're going to take a plea on those 2 remaining charges, or I'm going to give you 10 years. And I said no. So he took me to trial. That next trial, we had 11-1 not guilty. There was one black kid that kept walking back and forth. He gave me the finger. You're a cop. You're guilty of something. So that was a wash. The United States Attorney says we are not trying this case again, no matter what. We've wasted millions. Judge turned around and said, you will try Davis again, and you'll have the United States Attorney himself standing in front of me telling me why. So they rolled the dice. They had another trial, and I got found not guilty. And from that, everything seemed to turn my way.
Did you end up being compensated for this? Did you end up suing them after that, or you just at that point were so grateful that you said, I just want to be done?
I tried, but what happened with the NYPD, when we filed to get my job back, and this is crazy, it says right on the application, you cannot be a convicted felon and be a New York City police officer, right? So we waited till everything was overturned. Now I'm not a convicted felon. Everything is clear. Finally got my job back. The judge says I can't have my job back because I didn't file within a timely fashion. I blew the statute of limitations. My lawyer's argument was it took him 16 months to be cleared of all of this. How can he file for his job back if he's a convicted felon? So I'll never forget, Tommy asked this question to the judge. So you're telling me if Detective Davis wrote in crayon on a piece of paper from his jail cell, Dear Commissioner Safer, when I get out of prison in 4 years, can I have my job back? That would have stopped the clock and he would have been able to get his job back? And the judge says, yeah, it would have.
That's insane.
So
when did it come out that the FBI had lied?
it came out at the trial. But they said that they didn't lie, that Jerry Vittorio, the gangster, lied to them. But they knew it wasn't true because they had all the tapes. They knew there were no gunshots. When I gave him a ride home that night in a snowstorm, he was wired up. They knew none of this happened. But yet, they went and testified. And when the FBI walks into New York City to go testify, it's like they're gods, at least back in 1997. I don't know what happens to them now, but back then, I didn't stand a chance.
Why do you think they went after you so hard?
Because you're not supposed to mess around with any of their snitches. That's the only thing that, he was the king of the rats. He would go in and infiltrate different people and go and testify. He would get sentenced to 20 years and do 2 because he got ratted on somebody. And they would forever fall for this. Now, the FBI didn't want to use him because he threatened to kill 2 FBI agents and a federal judge in open court. So he said, okay, well, the FBI isn't going to use him. The DEA didn't want to use him because of his history and the things that he had done, beating people with baseball bats and all this other criminal activity. He was a bad character. He got United States Customs to fall for his line of crap, to get him out of that 20-year sentence, to get the Lucchese crime family that nobody knew who these guys were. I mean, they weren't the Sopranos. They weren't any of these really terrible guys. Yeah, they had their idiosyncrasies. They did their stupid stuff, their gambling, their prostitution, and other stuff. But here he is giving them machine guns with silencers that were provided by the feds. Heroin, swag, all provided by the feds to loop them in to this apartment where these FBI agents are with this rat person. And that's how the story went. But I never gave up. I never gave up my faith. I fought and I fought, and I still fight to this day.
All right, I hand it off to you now.
So, because this guy was in love with your girl and you didn't put up with him and he was their rat, that's how your life unraveled?
Basically, she was his girl first. So she was dating from when they were like 16, and he was a criminal then, and she knew it. And then he went away for armed robbery. He got sentenced to 7 years. And then she had met me. Now, I knew her when we were 12 years old, hanging out at the pool. And then that summer, I was a lifeguard at Glen Island. I was 18, and she came walking down the beach. And I said, "Hey, Diane, you remember me?" She said, "Lift up your glasses." And I lifted up my sunglasses. And she goes, "Oh, my God, Vinnie Davis." And we fell in love rather quickly and planned on getting married and the whole 9 yards. So at 21, I was married. 21, I was a police officer. Life was on the right course, going to have a family. And lo and behold, this maniac went and destroyed everything. And it was his mission to destroy me, not just me destroying him. I wanted him locked up because he was a criminal, not because I didn't like him.
Right.
He wanted me out of the way because he didn't like me. And he finally got what he wanted.
Are you still married to Diane?
Oh, no.
No.
Oh, no.
Tell us how you really feel.
Turns out that Diane was having an affair with this guy off and on the entire time I was a cop. So she was sneaking behind my back. He was out of prison. She would go and sneak off and go have sex with him. But if you watch Dateline and these other shows, you could see what this guy really is about, because John Hockenberry, ex-Sable, well, you wanted Diane back. Why didn't you take her back? Why did you go through everything? And he says, "I didn't want her back. Where I'm from, you don't chew your gum twice. She was with another man. She's a piece of..." And I had told her, even though everything we had gone through, I said, "Do not do this Dateline interview. You're not going to fare well." And then they go on in a Dateline interview. They're like the hero cop, the zero boyfriend, and the two-timer, Diane. And it was just, and then they showed her like sitting like this, rocking on a chair, and when it was bad. And I knew it was going to be bad, but I didn't still love her. I just knew that she was sick and she had issues, and I didn't want her to go through that. But as usual, she didn't listen.
So walk me through your faith process through that whole thing. So you spent 16 months in prison?
16 months.
What federal prison were you in?
It's 5.5 months in a Union County jail in a box. Okay. So I was brushing my teeth in the toilet, shaving in the toilet because there's no water pressure. I had absolutely nothing to do because it was protective custody. And so I kind of was losing my mind. I'm sure you've seen it, the push-ups, the sit-ups, there's only so many you can do. So once I got my bearings, I didn't know what commissary was. I'm a cop, and I didn't know what commissary was. So I didn't have my family put money in a commissary so that I can get decent food to eat or slippers to wear in the shower or anything else. That's how bad it was. But once I got kind of acclimated, that's when I says, "I'm going to sit down, I'm going to write this book." And I was like a sponge. I kept reading and reading and reading so I can get more words into my vocabulary and then look them up. I still have the pages. I still kept everything. And I wrote the book, one chapter at a time, mailed it out to my dad, and he would type it up and do editing. And that's why the book ends the way it does. I'm not giving any spoiler alerts, but it ends the way it does. And you're going to be women, you're going to be crying. But the second book's much better as far as the ending goes. But the first one is just like the cell door slamming shut. It was like that noise to me was the scariest noise I ever heard in my life. And I've been bullets flying past my head. You name it. That was the scariest noise I ever heard.
So what was your faith journey like during that 16 months?
Well, I started praying a lot, and I was actually allowed to go every Sunday to church in there. And I looked forward to it. I also went into the drug and alcohol program that they had available, because towards the end, if you read, I was drinking a lot. I almost killed myself. Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve one year, I actually put the gun in my mouth, and my brother Michael and his our best friend Ernie came in and saw me and, took the gun away. But that's how bad it was. So it was a slow track back. But when that appeal was being heard, and I got that phone call, it was, I felt God touch me and tell me, you're getting out. I don't know how, because the cards were stacked against me. Everything was wrong. And, you know, it's all these charges. And I'm sitting in a cell because before that, I had gone out to lunch with my dad and everyone at the courthouse. And I didn't think, you know, okay, this is over. I'm not guilty. Next thing you know, the jury's in and I got all these marshals standing around me. And I'm like, okay, this isn't good. And then he wouldn't let me out on bail pending appeal and handcuffed me. And, you know, I had lost my way. I was just like, but slowly I got it back. But that changed me. And my wife, we went on a honeymoon. We went to Las Brisas in Mexico. And it was 8 o'clock on a Sunday morning. She goes, where are you going? I said, I'm going to church. She goes, we're in Acapulco, Mexico. Where are you going to find a church? I said, you see that big cross right there? That's where I'm going. And I went. We go on vacations, whatever. I make it my business to get there and to be thankful for what happened.
I mean, I have to imagine that that's that part of the story is something you've seen played out in the prisons again and again, right?
Yeah, all the time. It's easy to find guys that find Jesus when they get into prison, but usually the guys that stick to the chapel are the ones that recognize their need for salvation and for Jesus. Because when you get into a prison, man, there's only two ways you can go. You can either go straight off the deep end or you can go straight to God. There's no in between. If you get into the in between, you're in the yard and you're finding problems, and it gets pretty rough.
Well, I'll never forget when I went to federal prison in Bradford, Pennsylvania, and you walk down to go to the chow line, and this guy was getting shanked in front of me. And I'm stupid. I'm in here, I'm a cop. And I'm going to bend over to help this guy to pick him up. And the brother behind me turned around and says, look straight ahead and keep walking. You didn't see nothing. Trust me. And then later on, it was like gladiator school in there. They put the locks on your belts, and they swing them and crack people's heads open, and then they hold up the tops of the garbage cans. That's why it's gladiator school. That's what all it is. And they would kill each other. And the lieutenant would call everyone, they shut everything down, and then he would go and do the interviews. And he'd be like, you're one of us. Tell her. I'm like, are you crazy? I'm one of you? Not anymore, I'm not. I'm one of them. And that's the way you got to live. It's crazy to live your life like that. But
did you feel you were under particular threat, having probably put some of those guys in there over the years?
in the Union County Jail in New Jersey, that's where most of it, they were like coming right up to the glass. We're going to kill you. You're going to get out of that cell. They can't watch you 20. I was scared to death. You know, you got these big guys that they're going to kill you. And to think about being stabbed to death by a shank, you know, blaze of glory, gun battle, yes. Stabbed 100 times with a pen in the neck, and no. So, but when I got to federal prison, I learned, and they said, just leave your folder on your desk. And on the folder, it's stamped OC, organized crime. They don't even open it. They don't go looking at it after that. They just leave it alone. So in the federal place, they didn't know I was a cop, except the first place when a correction officer turned around. I was going to get on the bus, and he turned around and he goes, "Oh, cop here." And I was like, "What? Really? You're the reason why I couldn't become a cop. You're the reason." I says, "I'm the reason? What you just did shows the whole world you have no right wearing a shield. Period. The end." But I did. I didn't do anything. But so I learned fast. And I learned how to hold my own. And I also learned how, as you probably know, your commissary is key. You make lots of friends with your commissary. So I had this guy in my next cell. He would eat dishwashers. That's how big this guy was. And on chicken night, I go around and scoop up all the chicken to make sure he got all the chicken he wanted. And again, with the commissary, helped him out. Back then we had cigarettes that we used like for money. So, but yeah, it was for kind of small white guy, was intimidating, but you learn as long as you mind your business. Don't get involved with gambling or any of that other nonsense. Stay on the path, pray, write, study, and you can do okay.
Vinnie, there are people that are watching this right now that are in law enforcement. There are people that are watching this right now who are on the prison side of things. For some deserve to be there, some don't. And there are a lot of people right now who have faith and other people who don't. What words of wisdom can you give to people who are struggling with that faith, regardless of their background, where they're sitting right now? How can you help guide them?
Well, I keep thinking about this. He was a middle-aged Hispanic guy, and he owned a bodega in the Bronx. And we became kind of friendly, talking all the time. And he told me his story. And his story was no criminal record. It's his first arrest. Guys would come into his bodega and use his phone, and drug dealers. And he would turn around and give a message. Oh, yeah, he would answer the phone. Oh, yeah, so one of them came in. Well, what's his name called looking for you? Juan or Jose, whatever, was looking for you. And that's what he did. Whatever. It was no big deal, right? 20 years on conspiracy to distribute narcotics. And showed me all his paperwork, and he was fighting through the appeal process and everything else. But he still believed in God. We still talked about God. We talked about having faith and how you can't just, I don't know how this happened. We can't blame God for happening. It happened. But if you keep the faith and you stay within God's laws, you'll be free. And I'm hoping that he is. I would say the chances are, after doing that many years, that they did away with his conviction. Because this, what the Fed, I have a real problem with the federal system, with what they do. Because it's not a fair system at all. You lie to me as a detective, nothing happens to you. You lie to an FBI agent, 5 years. Just like that. And they'll tell you you're getting 5 years. So what they did to General Flynn with that, was basically what they did with me. They invited me to come out to New Jersey to sit down in a diner to tell them all I knew about Richie Sable and his dealings with this gangster, Jerry Vittorio. And I laid it all out to them. Everything that was going on. And what did they do? When they were shutting up, when they were closing down their tape, one of the guys turns to the other agent and goes, Murphy's Law. That's what happened to this poor cop. But it was still on the tape. It was Murphy's Law. And that's what they do. They don't care. They'll go after anybody and try to, like General Flynn. Wife, family, house, the whole 9 yards. Me. I had lost everything by then. All the money went to the lawyers and everything else. So what do you have? Throw me in prison. I don't got any place to live anyway anymore. Do whatever you want to do. And that's how you can get them, by fighting them to the very end. But their deal is they're going to bankrupt you. They're going to humiliate you. They're going to have 1 million of their AUSAs file motions against your attorneys, which takes money and more money until there's nothing left. And that poor man didn't want to go to jail, and I can't blame him. But I said I couldn't let them win. That's why I did what I did. That's why I fought the way I did. And my beliefs and my strategy paid off. Now, does it pay off for everybody? Most likely not, because the government is rigged to destroy you. Like President Trump, I don't even know how he can walk and talk after being what he's been through, because they're relentless, they're ruthless, and they will destroy your life to make a point.
Well, I think when God takes your head and moves it like that so that a bullet misses you,
tip your ear.
I think that'll give you the, hey, my good and faithful servant, you're on the right path. I could be wrong, but.
Well, I would hope that I'm on the same path with him. For him, 16 months, I could take it. I did it. Took
I was going to say, it sounds like you've had a few close calls with bullets yourself, too.
Yeah.
So.
Yep.
Vinnie, where can people buy the book?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, every place online, wherever, you can get it.
Soon to be a major motion film?
They're working on it. They're in the process of rewriting the script again for a third time. So the last time, ironically, we were this close, $38 million budget, getting done, and COVID happened. And I got the phone call that not only were they shutting it down, they didn't know if there was ever going to be a movie theater open again, so they just did away with it altogether. So,
Can I have like a cameo?
absolutely.
Just make me look cool
Absolutely.
or tough or something. Parting
We
thoughts.
can make you look tough.
Thanks.
Parting thoughts. Yeah, they can make you an inmate in a federal prison somewhere. Now, Vinny, your story's incredible, man. I don't know how to say what happened to you was just unfair. Justice is something that, you know, we hope for justice. Sometimes justice isn't what we achieve, but I know from a biblical perspective, justice is not a biblical value. We talk about all the time about justice being something that we don't really want to be enacted, because if we ask for justice, we get what we deserve, and what we deserve is death. But from an earthly perspective, it doesn't seem like you got what you deserve, because you didn't deserve what you got.
I may have done some bad things when I was younger that I had some penance to pay for. I don't know. I was no angel. I was no criminal, but I was no angel. So, you know, eating meat on Fridays and not paying attention to Lent. I'm sorry. But the ironic thing, too, people say to me all the time, you got out on Bastille Day, July 15th, 1999. But yet you went and worked at Ground Zero, 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, from the day it happened until November 5th. Why? People ask, why would you do that? Being a cop is in here. For sure. It's not a badge that you're wearing, even though I did have a badge to wear, but still, I went down there because my brothers and innocent people were buried and they needed help, and that's why I went down there, and that's why if someone needed help tomorrow, I would do it all over again, because it's just what I do.
Yeah. Thanks for who you are, man.
Thank you.
Vinny, I love you, brother. Thanks for coming out, man.
God bless
Very
you.
nice meeting you.
God bless you, brother.
Guys, thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for subscribing to the Law Enforcement Today channel on pray.com. Thanks for your patience with the wind. That's just God's way of reminding us all who's really in charge of everything here. Any donations that do come in, we thank you for. They continue to fund the storytelling of this process. So we're grateful, but thanks for hitting that share button. God bless you all. God bless America. And man, let's go get under some shelter, huh?
Amen.